Hey, fuck faces, you fucking pieces of shit, slime ball motherfuckers. If you're tuning in today to this episode of Anonymous Investors Podcast, you are a fuckhead. You better listen to the whole entire episode and make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast. And, I just called you a fuck face to piss you off because angry people increase retention rate. So, fuck you, motherfuckers. And today we have Stonkman to my left, and I am the almighty, all-powerful God, and you must do whatever the fuck I say. How are you doing today, Stonkman?
What up? I finally settled on a name. I think Stonkman is more than fine. I went through a lot of transitions. I was a them for a while. I was a he she for a while, and I was an it for a while. Additionally, I was also an Apache attack helicopter for quite a bit. So it's great to find some purpose in some place. As some of you have may noticed recently, I am now Stonkman. So now you can confirm my gender. So yeah.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't assume anybody's gender there, but I understand what you're trying to say there. But what's going on, Stonkman? Any news this past week that you want to discuss today?
Yeah, we got a lot to get into, and we'll get there shortly.
Hey, fuck your bitch, motherfucker.
What are you freestyling?
Hey, hey,
Get 6ix9ine on here.
motherfucker. Pop, 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 pop. Fucking put a drill right through your fucking head.
I got a new soundboard, folks. We can listen to music. It's pretty cool.
Motherfucker. Pull up on your bitch, motherfucker. I pull out the Uzi. I start spraying, motherfucker. Hey.
All right, that was awesome. Oh my god, dude. Speaking of shooting, right? Not actually shooting, but shooting, like shooting basketballs, right? The NBA. A lot of stuff going on with the NBA. The finals going on. For those of you who don't know, it's the Boston Celtics and Golden State Warriors playing each other, and it's been quite a series. As we're recording this, the whole series is going on. But more recently, there was this fucking headline. I'm on YouTube, right? I'm watching videos, I'm winding down, and I go to one of my favorite shows, the Pat McAfee show, and I see a clip come up, and it's like, what the fuck is this? And it's titled something like NBA ref admits to rigging games, and I'm like, okay, all right, folks, is this the Tim Donaghy clip? Is this like a throwback clip that they posted? No. So for those of you who aren't aware, the whole Tim Donaghy thing is back in 2007. Tim Donaghy was charged, and he was charged with like literally working with like criminal enterprise to rig the outcome of NBA games. A lot of people look at that like, I think it was the Lakers Kings series that was like up in question, and there's a couple other different playoff series, but like basically he admitted to like rigging games to cover spreads and to cover over unders and whatever and all this other shit. But there's actually a ref that is a legit ref that came out, and he said that there's selective calls going on, and he's on video saying this. And this season, officiating has been really inconsistent, and a lot of people have been complaining. And it was the instance where it was in game 2 of the NBA Finals, and Draymond Green and Jaylen Brown kind of got into it, and this ref came out, and he's a referee analyst, and his name is Steve Javi, and he basically spoke about this incident and admitted that the refs bend the rules depending upon the circumstances of the game. So Green already had a tech, and another one would have gotten him ejected. So he made the point that with that information in mind, the refs chose to just let the situation play out, which is kind of dumb, because if you give the guy a tech normally, right, then why wouldn't you give him one there? It's just so silly, right? And the whole league, like when you look at all these sports leagues, the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, I guess the MLS, which isn't really a fucking league in America, but whatever. I guess people watch it. Maybe it's on in like, nursing homes, or it's like a CNN situation where, they pay to get the play in the airports and all that. I don't know if you know about that, but that's a whole nother can of worms. But, they got to go to game 7, right? Game 7 of the World Series, Game 7 of the Stanley Cup, Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Like, that's where they make the most revenue, right? Because they're able to sell more ad spots on television and sell more tickets and, you know, all this other jazz that comes with that. But here's what he was quoted with saying, and Twitter went nuts on this. The quote is, the two guys were going after each other. You have to consider one player has definitely a technical foul. Is it enough to call a double T and eject the one player? Personally, I would say nothing and just let it diffuse as that. And people went nuts. So a couple of verified accounts responding. So Roosh on Twitter goes, Steve Javi is on live TV admitting that referees ignore the rule book to factor in ejecting Draymond. That is so damn ridiculous. Then we got Ben Dubose, who says Steve Javi, the NBA's lead officiating analyst, is openly suggesting on the league's official broadcast that the standard for a technical is different when a player has a technical in a big game. This is a remarkable example of saying the quiet part out loud. So, I mean, all these people who get pissed about, their team getting screwed in a big game or the team itself getting screwed in a big game, like, do they have valid points here? I mean, does the league have a duty to ensure that calls are made fairly and that there's uniform enforcing of these calls in big games? Or is it like it's just entertainment and people need to fucking move on? Like, what do you think about this? Because I know you're a big NBA guy like me.
Well, I mean, the NBA it's a big franchise. They just recently had COVID, and they shortened the season. They missed a lot of games, so they want to like make sure they maximize their revenue this year and making sure series go as long as possible. So that has something to do with how games are called. If a team's down 2-1, they don't want the series to go 3-1 because then the series is going to be shorter. So they'll give more calls to the team that's down 2-1 in the series so that the owners can make more revenue off of tickets and merchandise, etc., in the stadium in that regard. But yeah, I don't think people like fans show up. They don't want to see Draymond Green get thrown out. It makes the game more boring. So yeah, I think you have to like look at the situation and when making calls, and you don't want to throw somebody out of the game for something like that in the NBA Finals because that's going to upset a lot of people, and it's going to cause less people to be NBA fans, and it's going to cause less revenue for the NBA as a whole entire league.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you look at the Warriors, right, like they're based out of the Bay, right? The Bay specifically, San Francisco, right? And I think they moved to Oakland or whatever, right? Or maybe, oh no, they moved from Oakland to San Fran, right? That's what it was. But yeah, they have a lot of big tech companies up there, right? They've got a lot of tech guys going up there, and God only knows how much money those guys make. And some of the positions they've got, some of those software engineers and data analytics guys. So I'm sure that they get a lot of money coming in from like Apple, Google, YouTube, Netflix, whoever, right? Insert large tech company. So it's just been crazy. But yeah, like, I can imagine those ticket prices are pretty ridiculous, especially, I mean, the Celtics too. I mean, right? Like, historic franchise. But the Warriors, like, they're making this run. Like, they got everyone's kind of healthy finally again. And now they're making like a big push. But yeah, like Apple's just, like in terms of a company, like what they've done, I mean, it just looks like they constantly innovate and they're always looking for ways to improve. And I was seeing some ads from them, and I know they had that big event, right? What was that big event that was going on where they were unveiling shit? Because I did see some ads from them in the finals, so that's why they're on my mind right now.
I'm not sure exactly what the event was called, and yeah, I did hear they unveiled some new products, and I know they unveiled a buy now pay later. They're innovating in that sector. They should have did this a long time ago though. Like they have 200 billion in cash. They should be looking to move more into financial services and extending credit to their customers. But yeah, they launched this buy now pay later, and on the news you have all these BNPL players like PayPal, Affirm, Klarna, all of these like uh, fintech startups that they dropped like 20% on this news because there's fear that this whatever 2 trillion, $2.5 trillion company is going to take away market share from these other players. And you already see there's like a lot of turmoil in this sector of the market with Klarna laying off 10% of their workforce. PayPal is starting to lay off some of their workforce. Affirm is, that was $140 stock, $150, $160 stock not too long ago. Now it's under $20, I think. And, Apple is just going to go into that sector and take more and more market share. With this rising inflation and, high interest rate environment, it's going to become increasingly competitive. And, Apple is best positioned with the amount of cash they have on their books to basically offer the most amount of credit at the cheapest rates to their customers. And, I think this is basically a winner take all market. And I don't think a lot of these players like Affirm and Klarna are going to last in this turmoil marketplace. With, they have high expenses. They're not even free cash flow positive. And, I think they're in a lot of trouble. They're burning cash at rapid rates. So I think Apple is going to, it's going to be a winner take all, and Apple is going to dominate this marketplace. And, they should be extending credit. They should do this a long time ago because iPhones are expensive. It's going to make their devices cheaper. It's going to allow people to afford these luxury goods that Apple provides, and it's going to overall drive revenue and net income to their bottom line.
Yeah, and the event that I was referring to was WWDC. So that's the Worldwide Developers Conference that Apple holds, right? And it's usually in June, whenever there's some big news going on. And they unveiled iOS 16, new MacBook Airs and Pros, and it looks like Xcode Cloud. And another thing too is, I don't know if you saw this, but they also unveiled Apple's like new augmented reality smart glasses too, which is kind of like, what the fuck. So it kind of reminded me of Google Glass a little bit in a way, but Google Glass was like so ahead of its fucking time that, when that was rolled out, there was like no demand for it because everyone was like, what the fuck is this? Like that's like a 10-year-old innovation, 12-year-old innovation. So, but it looks pretty cool. Like, I don't know, I think that iOS 16 is dope. It also looks like they're doing a new like CarPlay rollout, which is so cool. Like, I want to get CarPlay in my car, but I have an older car, so it's like tough to like add that shit in. But all the newer cars have it. It's so dope. It's like literally the iPhone like iOS 15 layout, and you could just switch between like Waze and like your music and like calls and messages and whatever. And it's like really cool. I don't know. I like how it looks. But like a lot of companies have this, like the newer Lexuses have it. I think I saw like BMW has it, Mercedes. So CarPlay is dope. CarPlay is sick as fuck. But Apple, yeah, like they're just crushing it right now. And yeah, like another thing too is, do you think that potentially that Apple or some of these other companies could like, well, we saw Ford, right? Like Ford opened that plant in Mexico, right? Like, do you think that there are other companies that could like move shit, particularly manufacturing, out of the US now with like the whole economic situation kind of going upside down like we saw in the past? Or do you think it's going to be more of like manufacturing is going to stay here and they're going to kind of try to figure out a way to cut costs? Like we saw Tesla cut 10% of its workforce. I saw Salesforce getting ready to cut people. Couple other companies as well. So like, what do you think is going to happen from that like macroeconomic sort of like top-down view standpoint?
Well, I think people got to look towards the long term, and they got to develop their supply chain in house, because we saw recently with COVID, and these how these ships became like they went from 2,000 to 20,000, and there was delays and everything like that. And I think in this very competitive marketplace, I don't think you can last or exist without basically taking your full supply chain and linearly developing it in house, and having a fully stacked supply chain management strategy going forward, and implementing that, because you're going to have a lot of troubles with delays of goods, and then the markets move fast. You're going to have excess inventory. Nobody's going to want that inventory. It's hard to predict what goods you need, or what kind of inventory you need going forward, if basically you have these long delays. And you see that with Target, Walmart, and all these places, how they have excess inventory now because they weren't able to accurately predict their demand because of these long supply chain constraints. So I think a lot of companies are going to be looking to develop these cross-functional teams and integrating their supply chains in-house going forward. And if they don't do so, they're not gonna last in this market.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the whole thing is about longevity and, or excuse me, longevity. I can't talk today, but yeah, that's the whole thing. Is like you got to kind of keep everything in house. Like, if you're relying on people working outside or like in other countries, right? Like in Ford's case with opening that plant in Mexico, like now there's political risk, right? Like, what happens if the Mexican government, God forbid, gets overthrown or like they get co-opted or what if there's like like I mean you're paying people in pesos, I would imagine, right? Like what if there's a currency crisis? Like there's so many other factors that are at play when you don't do things in house and you just export or just transmit all of your manufacturing and production to other countries like Mexico in particular.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and you have these like CFOs. They think they're doing a good job because they're saving money over the short term, and not looking at the long term implications of not taking their supply chain in house. They should spend the extra cash and make themselves a more sustainable business and have a better environment. And that being said, right, just like supply chains, they should be moving back to the America. You have these other people that are doing total opposite. These Californians, they're basically leaving the country for Mexico. Imagine that, people leaving the country for Mexico, the total shithole country, Mexico. That shows how bad California is right now. That people are leaving the country for Mexico. There's over 347,000 people, that have moved from California this past year alone, and they say around 20% of them have left the country and they went to Mexico because of this high inflation rate environment, and that the houses are cheaper in Mexico and that people could live a better life. Imagine basically a state that's gone so much in the shithole that they could leave a that they could live a better life in Mexico. Drug infused and drug uh, with all the cartels and shit in Mexico. These people are moving there, and it's better than California.
A lot of corruption too, right? Like you mentioned the numbers somewhere in that 300,000 range. So 20%, we're looking at what, 60,000 people that went to Mexico. That's a lot of fucking people, man. That's a lot.
I know 60,000 people going to Mexico, and I don't understand why all these people are going to Mexico. I guess Joe Biden's strategy is basically to stop the illegal immigrants from coming across the border is just destroy the United States, and then they won't want to come across the border. We don't need to build a fence. We don't need to build a border. Just make the United States so bad that nobody wants to come here, and that's how we get rid of the illegals. Imagine if Trump would have had a strategy like that.
Well, it's funny. I don't know if you saw this, but like Greg Abbott, right? Texas has this huge problem now. They're having major border security issues, right? People just fucking walking right in. Border patrol being understaffed and not having enough people to, go in and kind of rectify the situation. But Greg Abbott issued an order where border patrol, when they catch people on that southern border, by the southern border between Texas and Mexico, whenever they catch people, they load them onto a bus, and then they take the bus, they drive the bus all the way to DC, and they just let the people out right by the Capitol building. Right in DC, they just let them go. And Greg Abbott was like, "Oh, if he doesn't want to do anything about the border, fuck him. We're gonna send all the illegals to DC. He can take care of them then. Not my business." It's fucking hysterical that that's going
That's a
on.
great idea. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that should.
he's been doing it. He's been doing it for like the last couple of months, and Biden's been kind of going back and forth with him, but he's not stopping him from doing it. It's pretty funny.
I don't think you can stop him from doing it. It's a private enterprise. He's got his bus, takes his bus, and he rides it down. You can't stop interstate travel.
That's right. He's like Drake with the bus, Instead of having the bus of like all the women or whatever going to the party, he's got the bus with all the illegal Mexicans going to fucking DC. Oh, it's just comedy. And I just laugh because it just like, oh my God. It just seems that there's like a lot of weird shit going on with the country, like just wacky shit. Oh my God. People crack me
The
up.
one gripe I have with that is I think he should have a train. It's faster.
Yeah,
put more
especially
people
with the
to
cost of
Washington D.C.
gas
at a
being as
faster
high
rate.
as it is, it seems kind of inefficient, right? To just drive around like that. I mean, you are getting rid of people who are going to draw into, the welfare state and the system you created for taxpayers. Of course, they would draw into that. So I'm sure there is some savings there for the state of Texas, but yeah, I think that it is a little inefficient. The price of gas is a little too high, and I think that they've got to come up with a better way to transport people. I think a steam engine would probably be more economical, or some shit like that, like a train, like a high speed train.
Yeah, not a bad idea. Maybe a boring tunnel from Texas to Washington D.C.
Yeah, well,
Maybe
California, you bring that up. California was building that fucking bullet train. Did you see this? They were building a bullet train, and Elon Musk was like, "Oh, I'm gonna build the Hyperloop from Hawthorne to LA or something like that, right?" And he picked Hawthorne in particular because that's where SpaceX is based out of. And then at that up until recently, Tesla was based out of LA, I believe. So, or it was something like that. Whatever. One of the fucking places was in Hawthorne. One of them was in LA. So he was constantly flying, and he also got pissed with the traffic, right? Because he was sitting in traffic to and from, each respective airport. So the whole thing was that he was like, "Fuck it, we'll build a hyperloop. We'll build a tunnel." So he built the tunnel, and then the state came to him and was like, "Can you build one for wherever?" It was like LA to San Fran. Like they wanted to do this giant project, right? So he was like assisting with that, but the state kind of wanted to build that out and they didn't want to let him build it out. So they went like over budget to the point where they were spending, it was some fucking crazy number, like $10 million for every mile. And, if you look at the size of California, it's fucking massive, right? In terms of length. So to go from the Bay Area all the way to LA, like at 10 million a mile, like that shit was never getting completed. So apparently they wasted like hundreds of millions of dollars and they didn't even complete the project, and now they're just scrapping it after building out like, I don't know, like 10 or 12 miles. So they basically just burned like 100 million for no reason. Pretty incredible.
The government, that's not nothing new for the government to do. They waste a lot of money. There's a lot of corruption in the in ways in where the government spends money. I was reading maybe about 4, 5, 6 months ago that they were spending $95 to $100 on per screw on some kind of construction job, which is physically impossible. A screw costs about less than a penny. You buy it in a package. And they were spending $95 to $100 for a screw.
Well, the whole problem with that is that there's a lot of corruption in that state too. I mean, they make a lot of money. If you separated California, right, as its own state and you looked at its GDP, I'm just going to look this up quick in the meantime. But California, in terms of like GDP, if it was like a country, I think if it was a country, it would be oh, here it is. I just found it. The economy of the state of California is the largest in the United States with a $3.4 trillion GDP, right? Like if you looked at it that way. So if California were a sovereign nation, it would be ranked as the world's fifth largest economy ahead of India and behind Germany. Very interesting. The fifth largest economy in the world. So California's big time. I mean, they make a lot of money and then they just ruin it with all these stupid policies. Like California and New York are like the prime examples of that. It really doesn't get, worse than that. But I don't know if you heard about this. This was kind of funny to me too. We were talking about Mexico right before and how you have all these Californians leaving for Mexico, which is insane. But there was actually something that was going on that was the inverse of that. So Doc Antle, remember him? Doc Antle from Tiger King, the Netflix show. He got caught smuggling, allegedly. He was charged by federal prosecutors who were alleging that he was smuggling in Mexicans to the United States and he was laundering money. So that sounds like a cartel operation to me. I don't know about you, but Tiger King was good, and I'm very familiar with this guy. He also was charged a while back for, I believe in 2020, he was charged with 2 felony counts related to wildlife trafficking and 13 additional misdemeanors after an investigation by the Attorney General of Virginia, it says. So this is the guy that, he was like a pimp. This guy was balling out. He had like 5 wives or some shit like that. It was some crazy thing. And it wasn't Jeff Lowe. Remember him, Jeff Lowe? He was the guy with like the bandana and the hat on or whatever. He was a wacko. He ended up taking over the GW Zoo when Joe Exotic went to jail, and they kind of like put him away. But yeah, that was like this whole fucking crazy thing where that show was a clusterfuck, man. That was some wild shit. But yeah, on that same topic of the Mexican stuff, I figured I'd bring up Doc Antle because it's a good throwback to like what was going on during COVID and what everyone was watching. So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have been accused of money laundering recently. Did you see that Peter Schiff? He was accused of his Euro Pacific Capital Bank was accused of laundering money for drug cartels and for facilitating tax evasion. This came out in
oh boy.
60 Minutes Australia,
Oh, I
and
didn't hear that.
yeah, he's basically filing a defamation lawsuit against this media company in Australia, Fairfax Media, and they're basically I don't know if they're related to 60 Minutes USA or whatever, or they just licensed the name, but yeah, they accused them of facilitating money laundering and tax evasion, and like he fully denies it. And this is a problem because like a lot of people have dropped them. A lot of other banks have dropped them before this article came out. He had uh like he did business with 8,000 different depositors and had $140 million in deposits. Now he's losing like a lot of money. A lot of people have pulled out because in the financial industry, even being accused of money laundering, a lot of people get scared. Their compliance departments come in, and his bank is really under a lot of financial pressure now, and he's filing a defamation lawsuit to basically recoup some of the money that he lost from this. He says it's a fake article. I don't know how true it is that he was facilitating money laundering.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like we know where he stands with Bitcoin and how he feels about that in general. Like he's just the biggest like adversary to Bitcoin, right? But the whole thing is that he constantly goes on these like weird tangents where he's like, "Oh my god." Like if you listen to a show or you listen to interviews with him, it's like he has to bring up Bitcoin and he's like, "I hate it so much. Oh my god." It's just like reminds me of like people whose like parents in like the 20s and 30s like hated rock music, and then like the 50s and 60s kind of came around, right? And then like Woodstock, and like people were like, "Oh, rock music's fucking awesome." And now it's just become like a normal thing. But it kind of reminds me of that. Like he's not hip to it, he's not in tune with it. But his whole thing, like he's always been like a contrarian. So I always felt like naturally he would have a lot of enemies. Because he's always just pointing out like the glaring inefficiencies in the system, and he doesn't really go along with like that sort of mainstream narrative that like everything's okay and everyone has to hold hands and sing fucking kumbaya or whatever, right? So I always kind of looked at him a little bit differently than I would anyone else that would regularly go on CNBC. And he said that they stopped having him on that show. I think it was like Fast Money or something like that, right? Because Mad Money is Kramer. I think they have Fast Money. And they used to interview him pretty regularly, and he got into like arguments on there, and people like laugh at him and shit, and he like go back at him, and it was pretty entertaining. You could find some good clips. You could also find some clips where it's like Peter Schiff was right, where he like basically predicts the collapse of the housing market. Once default rates hit 8%, the bottom would just fall out, which is what he predicted, and of course it was true. There were a lot of other people that predicted that as well, but he was like he's been very much maligned by like mainstream news, so CNBC won't have him on anymore. And then also factor in the prospect that he lives in Puerto Rico, right? And like maybe a lot of people don't know about this, but like the whole thing with Puerto Rico is that if you live there, you're still an American, but because it's a Commonwealth, you relinquish the right to vote. You have to live there for 183 calendar days, and then you're not subjected to federal income tax, and instead you pay a 4% flat tax on all of your income. And then if you move there and you're an American, so let's say I have a $5 or $10 million investment portfolio and I'm getting ready to retire. So if I move to Puerto Rico and I live there for, I believe it's 10 years, maybe you know more about this, you can correct me. But I think it's 10 years. After living there for 10 years, all of your capital gains vest, and then you're not subjected to federal income tax upon selling any securities. So there's a lot of like tax benefits to living there. We saw John Paulson was the guy that kind of opened the floodgates to moving to Puerto Rico, and John Paulson being the head of Paulson and Company, the prestigious hedge fund. Peter Schiff did the same thing, and then that's also why Logan Paul did it. He did it because of the Floyd Mayweather fight, where he made, I believe, 25 million or 20 million. So by moving to Puerto Rico and living there for half the year, he became a Puerto Rican resident, didn't have to pay federal income tax, and then moved the fight itself to Florida, where he wouldn't pay state income tax. So of that 20 to 25 million, he paid out, the promotion company paid out his manager. I'm sure money went to the venue or to whatever. And then after all the fees to the people that were on his team and the people he had to pay out for hosting the event, whatever amount he had, he walked away with the full amount. So I would imagine it was probably like 10 or 12 million, maybe he netted 14 million, depends, and then didn't pay any taxes. So there's definitely, I feel like with Peter Schiff, there's definitely an aspect where it's like he's like openly advocating for people to move to Puerto Rico and businesses to move to Puerto Rico. So he's like kind of openly advocating for people to not pay taxes. And like the last guy that did that comes to mind for me, who was like a pretty well-known figure, is John McAfee. Like if you remember, he, before his death, he had videos where he's on a boat and he's like, I haven't paid tax. Like, remember when he ran to be the Libertarian candidate during the 2016 election, I think it was? He basically said, he was like, oh, I haven't paid taxes in like 5 years or whatever. He's like, I stopped paying taxes. And then the IRS was like, what? And then they kind of came after him. So it's like, I think that if you're in a situation where you have a voice and you have like a decent following and you're like openly advocating for people to not pay taxes in like whatever legal way or illegal way in John McAfee's case, I think that they're going to spend resources to go after you. And I would not be surprised if, in that case of the 60 Minutes Australian hit piece or, article is just their way of like going after him through like some type of international body, especially if it's owned by the same 60 Minutes that operates within the US, as we know. There's a little bit of stuff going on there where, well, I'll leave it at this. Operation Mockingbird and stuff like that goes on. So I said my piece. I think that's fair to say. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, Australia has like they have a lot of tax loopholes. Their tax rate, I think it's ridiculous. If tax rates are around 60%, I think, but they have some of the best tax loopholes in the world. So like I wouldn't be surprised if the J5, which is basically like the Australian version of the IRS, is coming after his ass. But I mean, yeah, Australia is basically their regulatory body. The CFR is they're coming after him for money laundering, and they want to shut down his bank. I think it's because he's helping a lot of people basically avoid Australian taxes. I don't think he's doing anything illegal per se, but he's taking a lot of governmental revenue away from them. And I don't know if you saw this, but did you see Operation Atlantis? Did you see what happened there?
I did not.
Okay, so Operation Atlantis is basically like kind of like Australian's version of the Panama Papers. It's all of these like wealthy people in Australia that were basically caught evading taxes and not paying their fair share per se. So it's like think about like the Panama Papers, like how all these people were caught. I think like I don't know who was caught in the Panama Papers. It was all celebrities.
Celebrities. I saw Putin. I
Yeah,
saw Emma Watson was on there.
these are all like
Lionel
Australian.
Messi, Ronaldo, all the big footballers. Yeah, a lot of people.
These are all just like Australian celebrities that are caught up in this one. And they said that's how he was implicated in this money laundering scheme. He was caught through like Operation Atlantis and that investigation.
That's interesting too, because I don't know if you know this, or a lot of people don't know this, but gold in particular never hits the banking system. So, which means that it never is like given a serial number. So like there are gold bars that hit the market that are unaccounted for, right? Because no one really knows the true market cap of gold. I mean, when you look at Bitcoin, and we mentioned this in the past, like about Bitcoin's valuation perspective, exactly. The best way to pass down wealth without inheritance tax is gold, right? Because it can't be physically tracked. That's why I said it doesn't hit the banking system at all. So the whole thing is that, you have gold. You're supposed to report the amount of gold you have, but I mean, it's not like there's someone that goes door to door to verify how much gold you have in your custody. So it never hits the banking system. And if you look at what he does, he has Europack, right? But what's the other thing he's always pushing? Shift gold. Oh, buy our shift gold, buy our shift gold.
Yeah, there's no
So,
KYC for gold. I never seen any KYC for gold. I think that they might actually consider pushing that in the future. Like when you go to a jewelry stores or you might go to buy gold, I think eventually they're gonna have KYC for gold. They're gonna push that on people.
100%. And if you look at shift gold, like the price that they charge over spot being like the market rate, they charge a lot. Like it's very expensive compared to like AmpMax and AmpMax is the American Precious Metals Exchange. But when you look at any of these other like sites, and they're very expensive at Max, like, but if you look at any place that sells gold and then you compare it to Shift Gold is very expensive. So that might be, I don't know what's going on there, but he's charging a lot. I guess there's obviously a demand for it and people are buying it there. But maybe he's directing customers from Europack to say, hey, I sell gold. Like maybe you should buy gold or whatever. And people are, I don't want to get into this, but maybe people are buying gold to like, I don't know, potentially or allegedly hide money. Like, I don't know. It just seems like that's like a really foolproof way to hide money from the banking system.
There's definitely he's definitely a shady character. I mean, I can usually tell like who the shady characters are. He just looks like a shady character. Peter Schiff.
Yeah, I think I don't know. He clearly is against Bitcoin because it's a major competitor to Shift Gold and to his gold interests and his investments. But he's also the same guy that says you shouldn't have any equities. And if you listen to Peter Schiff, you would have made no money within the last, I don't know, 12 years, 13 years. You would have made nothing. So he's not the guy to listen to when it comes to that. He might be right about a lot of different things. Like if you look at him when he talks about some macroeconomic factors and he's talking about how the unemployment numbers are fake, right? Because Americans, the unemployment numbers are fake because it doesn't factor in people who just dropped out of the labor force, right? Like he commonly will talk about that. That's a legit thing, right? Like if you look at the data the Fed puts out, they constantly change the metrics. The inflation metric changed in the 80s, it changed in the 90s, and then it changed more recently in the 2010s. And if you look at the metrics from the 80s and 90s, it suggests 14 or 15% inflation. The ones from the 90s, like when you look at that data, people who are sort of like contrarian macroeconomic analysts will cite like the 90s Fed model as like the most accurate. It's also like when you look at job rates, Americans are working more part-time jobs than ever before. And another thing too is like when you look at the job creation rates, they'll say like, oh, we added 300,000 new jobs or whatever. Okay, but what happens is, let's say there's someone working one full-time position at 40 hours a week, and then that person is, laid off because the employer doesn't want to pay medical coverage or pay any sort of insurance for employing this guy 40 hours a week. And he instead replaces that guy with, I don't know, let's say two people working 20 hours a week part-time. The way that they classify the job creation is they say that a job was created because two people are employed as opposed to one, even though the output is still the same. So if you actually look at productivity in that respect, productivity has been stagnant because you're just displacing people from working more full-time jobs and replacing them with part-timers. And it's this whole weird thing going on. And then, that's how you end up in a situation with Americans working more part-time jobs than ever before because employers don't want to pay into medical. They don't want to pay into insurance and all this other stuff that comes with employing someone full-time. So it's just, this whole thing's a total mess. And he's been right about that. But like you said, there's a lot more going on there. And there's a reason he's very critical of some things going on. He might have a point, but look at it, follow the money, right? If he's saying the market's going to collapse tomorrow, his pitch is this: the market's going to collapse tomorrow and you're going to lose everything. What's his solution? Well, or his call to action in this case, his call to action is, oh, buy gold. Well, where do I buy gold? Oh, I can buy gold at shiftgold.com or whatever the fucking website is. Like he's a salesman. He's a salesman, 100%. It's like Alex Jones coming out and being like, they're putting shit in the water. And then you're like, what the fuck? Oh my God. And then he goes, well, you can go on down to my website and you can buy a water filter for $2,000 or whatever the fuck it is. He's a salesman. That's it. Like he's trying to sell you something. And if you're not aware and you're not paying attention, you're not going to know. And that's just what it is.
That's completely correct. He is he's been shilling gold for the longest time. He's been saying that we're gonna have a market collapse. You know, probably since the day he came out of the womb, he's been saying, "Oh, the market's gonna collapse. The market's gonna collapse." And people that say that eventually they're correct. And he's gonna be correct this year when the market collapses. But you lost a lot of money if you weren't in the market the past 5, 6, 7 years. So his time frames, his time horizons are all off. And yeah, you're right. He's pushing the market. He's pushing like this like recessionary fears because they're gonna go to him and then they're gonna pay exorbitant rates above spot for gold, and they're gonna get ripped off. And if you look at gold since the 1970s, you have a negative return. It's like returned about 1% a year. If you bought gold since 1970 and you held it till today, you basically have a 1% return. So you lost money. You lost money
Totally
through
agree.
inflation.
Totally agree.
You got to buy real assets.
Yeah. And on that same note of like people being investigated and governments kind of going after people, so there were a bunch of new headlines that came out from the SEC. Gary Gensler, your buddy, was really busy. I guess he decided to go to work this week, right? Put in his 40 hours like the rest of us. But Gary Gensler, your buddy. So here's a big headline that came out. The SEC is considering routing individual brokerage account trades to auctions. That'll be very interesting to see if that happens. I don't know what the ramifications of that are going to be, but I'm very surprised that this is becoming like a hot button issue and it's commonly being spoken about now. So what do you think would happen if individual trades from retail brokerage accounts go to auction?
I don't really know how that would work in this marketplace if things just went to auction. Would there be enough liquidity, and how long would it take for the trades to settle?
Exactly. That's my concern because right now it's T+2 to settle. That's the transaction date +2, unless you're buying government issued securities like T-bills, T-bonds, T-notes, or munis. Those are T1, transaction date +1. So I'm curious as well. Is this going to affect the settlement horizon? How is this going to affect the economy? Is this going to affect the time in which orders are filled, right? Or, certain things are exercised like stop losses and trailing stops and buy limits, and like how is that going to affect everything? I'm not sure. So we'll keep you posted on that, and we'll see what else.
I mean, a lot of people have been complaining about payment for order flow, but if you look at it, it's really the best method to conduct trades and have them settle. And if you saw, like, if you looked at Gary Gensler's statement, he said all that he's looking into this auction process, blah 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 blah. But then at the end, that he gives his real motive of what he's going to do. He says, "But I'm wary of changing anything because of how good payment for order flow has been towards the retail consumer." So you give so I think it's like more political agenda that he gave like that statement to satisfy people. But then if you look at like his last statement when he was talking, he basically gave what he truly thought.
Yeah, and then another thing that happened too, which was kind of fucking funny, was the whole ESG thing. Remember we were talking about this last time, and we mentioned how there were a few banks, right? Banks in particular were kind of playing the whole shenanigans game, and some of these hedge funds that were being started were playing this shenanigan game of like, oh, well, we're an ESG fund, so now the SEC is investigating Goldman Sachs. Of course, I mean, oh, Goldman Sachs, they would never, right? They would never do anything wrong. I mean, of course they're doing wrong again. Come on. We actually brought up the Malaysian fund, the 1MDB fund that was being used to launder money and embezzle funds from Malaysia. And that was Goldman Sachs, of course, behind that. That's just a place. I mean, they're like Wells Fargo. Like we spoke about Wells. they're just two institutions that will go to any extent to just defraud the public, to steal money, embezzle funds, and just fuck everyone over. To be really honest, I'm not surprised that they're involved in some type of ESG scandal and they're being investigated, rightly so. So then the other point I wanted to make is that we spoke about Terra and USD, or excuse me, Terra USD, Terra Luna, and that was Dumpquan, our buddy. Now they're being investigated by the SEC to determine whether or not they violated investor protection regulations. That's going to be interesting to see because is there a reciprocity where Do Kwon, being a South Korean citizen, could be charged in the U.S.? Would they extradite him? I believe so. I'm not too privy to the extradition laws, right? And I don't know if you are, but I would think that they probably would extradite him given the alliance that the two countries have and the situation going on there.
Well, of course they will extradite him. If they piss off the U.S., they don't want to piss off the U.S. because their North Korean body will take over their country. So they have to satisfy the U.S. commands. If the U.S. pushes for it and they really want it, they'll extradite him right away. They'll put him on a silver platter.
Yeah, and on that same note of like crypto scams and stuff going on with that, we also spoke about Seth Green and the whole situation with him with the Bored Ape NFT show, right? That was going on, and I brought up how it was stolen. Was there any new headlines or new revelations about that? Did we get any word about that whole situation and what transpired there? Did they kind of get to the bottom of it?
Oh, we got the word. We got the word back. I contacted a couple of my associates. We got the word. And last week I said how this was a whole marketing gimmick to promote the movie. And boy, was I right. I have to say I was right once again. I'm very rarely wrong, and I was right once again. This was a marketing gimmick to promote the movie, and he magically recovered his Bored Ape 1 week later. And it made the news about how he lost his Bored Ape, who was hacked and all this. And now the movie's probably going to do record sales from this marketing gimmick. And I knew it was a marketing gimmick once I saw that Gary Vee was involved, the marketing guru, the marketing genius.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually think I also said, what's to stop him from sending it to like a burner wallet and being like, oh, it was stolen, and then like no one knows that that's his like burner wallet, right? And then all of a sudden it just magically reappears back. Like, come on, there's no way. There's no fucking way. So he obviously just moved it from one wallet to a burner, and then now he's good. So, I mean, that's like very obvious. But anyway, I know Jack Dorsey was heavily involved in that NFT space as well, right? Like he's kind of he's been like a big proponent of NFTs and some of the emerging technologies with that. And I think that he's also been into like the Bored Apes and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah, Jack Dorsey is a big proponent of NFTs, big proponent of blockchain technology, and Jack Dorsey's a person. He believes that education is power. He's a big proponent of educating the youth and educating the public. And he partnered up with Jay-Z, and he launched basically a Bitcoin academy for people that live in Brooklyn. And their mission is basically to empower, provide education to the youth so that they're able to understand Bitcoin, understand its technology and potential. From demographics that are typically wouldn't understand this and that aren't undereducated. He's basically explaining the massive benefits that Bitcoin would provide to them.
Yeah, blockchain technologies is such like a interesting thing, and I love it. I love the encryption. I love that you're able to share, sensitive and private data, from one party to another without the risk of any potential third party, getting in there and kind of muddying the waters and, seizing control of that information, right? So in the case of, we spoke about this before too, which was really cool about, and it really is a great example, but like how, you go to one doctor, right? And you have a general physician and you do a checkup and, maybe you do something in that respect. And then all of a sudden, you have problems and you have to go see a cardiologist or go see a surgeon or whoever. That general physician can then transfer your records to a surgeon or a cardiologist very quickly, and it will be so encrypted that you don't have to worry about any potential third party accessing your files or seeing anything like that. So I love the ability to do that. I think that that's really cool, how you can just seamlessly share files with one another without potentially putting yourself at risk and, putting your family's information at risk. And I think that's really important. I think in today's day and age, like, privacy is very important, given the technological advancements and the sort of the invasions of privacies that have come with that. And I think that I like this whole shift towards blockchain technologies where, people are starting to realize that their digital footprint is a lot larger than they initially thought. And, in that respect, there's a lot of compromising of personal information and private information that comes with it.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this. I work at a bank. Health information is not really private. These banks, they buy during COVID, they were buying health information to evaluate the COVID crisis. They had health information at hand. I don't know if they bought it. They bought it through willing participants, but they definitely had healthcare information at their disposal.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of careers that were created, in this process of selling data and selling information. Like, data brokers are a real thing. Like, data brokerage houses are a real thing, where they literally just exist to collect data on people and to mine data and then sell the information to third parties. I mean, you have websites like Open Corporate, right? And Open Secret. Open Secret, I think, is the one that tells you, like, if you look up an individual, you can see who their political contributions were to. And then Open Corporate is for any sort of corporation. You could see people on the board that donated to certain political figures and whatever, and certain political causes and campaigns, right? So the whole thing is that, these are things that are supposed to be secret. These are, major decisions. You could kind of tell what someone's personal values are based on who they make a political contribution to, evidently. So, these are things that are meant to be kind of private, and they end up getting out into the public some way or another. And in my opinion, in particular, it's usually through the use of data brokers and things like that. And to actually go through the process to be taken off the list of data brokers and to be taken off of that is very arduous. You need attorneys, you need lawyers, you need people to kind of like go to bat for you, for lack of a better term, and to kind of say to those data brokers and data miners, like, hey, if you don't, you kind of get like a cease and desist type of thing going, where the attorney will say, like, hey, you need to stop posting this information about my client, otherwise we're going to sue you into fucking oblivion or whatever. And you have to use like scare tactics to kind of get them to stop doing that. But the average person's not going to pay an attorney, $1,000 to write a fucking letter, or $700 to write a letter to come up with that, or to sign off on that. So, but that's just something that a lot of people do to get out of that situation. But yeah, I mean, banks, they're, one of the largest violators of, buying personal information that's been private. Other medical institutions, for sure. Insurance companies, people forget about them. They also buy a lot of that information. And, more specifically, like social media companies, of course, and advertising agencies, right? Like, if they know that, you have problems with your teeth or whatever, you're going to get served ads for things that will direct you towards getting treatment to help your teeth, or, maybe getting braces, or getting like some type of cosmetic treatment for your teeth. So it's just a pretty shady system, and it just sucks that it works that way.
Well, money is the root of all incentives, and there's a lot of money at stake to see what's going on with people's health. Is COVID spreading rapidly? Is it in decline? And these banks, they're managing trillions and trillions of dollars of assets, so they got to make sure they know what's going on. So they're gonna buy the data, and that's it. And there's nothing you can do to stop them.
Well, there are steps that you can take. And I think a major thing is kind of focus on minimizing your digital footprint, trying to remain in a sense of anonymity is pretty important. Try to be more conscious of like what websites you're using and what services you're using, and how they're using your data. And I think it's very much impossible to be a ghost on the internet. But I think there are ways to like minimize your footprint and to kind of put yourself in a position where it's very tough to find out what's going on. I think that we've become a little too comfortable and a little too accustomed as a society, really, Western society, that is. We've become too comfortable in like willingly sharing information and oversharing information on social media, and I think people need to kind of get away from that. Um, but it's actually pretty funny because we did talk about people going away and people traveling and oversharing information in that respect. And what comes with that is people staying at hotels. And you told me this one thing offline, and it was so funny with the hotels. Like you gotta tell it here. It was with the robots and everything, and this whole robot rollout, and it's gonna be funny to see that happen and see what people think of that, especially as it initially comes into play.
Well, the pandemic, it's caused a lot of companies to basically innovate and try and look to cut costs and make up the money that they lost. So these hotels are looking into developing these robots to basically anytime somebody calls the front desk, instead of having someone go up to the room and deliver them whatever they need, like say toilet paper, shampoo, conditioner, or anything like that. I don't think it can bring up cots or anything like that yet. It's too heavy. But basically, the small stuff like the toiletries and stuff like that, they're gonna have these robots go up to the room and deliver these goods, which is gonna cut. It's gonna lower their overhead and allow them to be more profitable. But even so, even with these like cut costs, there was an article I think in the Wall Street Journal that said hotel rates are like rising rapidly. So they're cutting costs and they're still increasing their prices to stay at a hotel. So yeah, we're in a high inflationary environment, and a lot of these companies are cutting costs. So we should see some good earnings in the hotel sector if demand doesn't wane. But I think we're going to see massive demand wane over the coming months.
You know who became a big time shareholder in hotels recently, right? Or relatively recently? Do you know?
Who? Warren Buffett?
Bill Gates. Good guess, though. Warren Buffett, close friend of Bill Gates. It was Bill Gates, and it was through Cascade Investments. That's who we spoke about with, I believe it was Michael Larson, who's the fund manager there. So that's Bill Gates's family office, for those of you who don't know, Cascade Investments. Larson was also the guy that suggested that Bill Gates buys up like all this farmland in, middle America. So he basically has Bill Gates basically has a monopoly on farmland too, which is kind of scary. But he also made it a point to say that he thinks that people need to move away from meat and they need to eat this soy shit.
Well, you know
And
why he's doing that, right? That's why he buys the farmland, and then he forces people to move to soy. He artificially cuts back on the food supply, and then people have to move to soy, and meet his motive for all people going vegan.
absolutely, yeah, it just seems that he's looking to socially engineer society towards what he wants and everything that comes with that. And he's not really giving people the freedom to do what they want. But we obviously believe in, letting people expressing their individuality and making decisions on their own volition.
Yeah,
And
that's
on that,
right. The world is never going to go. We're never going to have a fully vegan world, and all these people they gotta come to grips with that, and they have to stop acting like, oh, you kill the animals, it's inhumane. No, fuck that. This is a dog eat dog world, and we do what we have to do. If you went up to a lion, the lion wouldn't second guess killing you. So don't worry about killing these animals and eating them for food. These animals would kill you in a second.
I think a main thing that a lot of people forget is that, first of all, meat has a lot of essential nutrients that we need to develop, and important for brain function. Omega 3, right? Some of the B12, B6, some of the tougher nutrients to get through plants. Unless you're eating certain plants every day, in which case, you really don't have a well balanced diet. But you need meat. Meat is very essential. Another thing, too, to be considered is that people don't really look at the situation for what it is. And they kind of look at it as like, oh my God, you're eating meat, like you're killing animals. This is terrible. But really, if you're not contributing to the production and the mistreatment of animals in factory farms, you're doing it right. If you have something like a cow, I talk about this extensively offline, but like a cow, you want grass fed and grass finished beef because it's higher in omega 3, which is healthier for you, and lower in omega 6, which is bad for you. So very high omega 3 content is what you want. You'll feel much more full. The meat will be a little bit more tender. It'll be more delicious. because it's what humans have evolved eating. Eating meat from an animal that is grazed off of naturally occurring and grown grass with no pesticides and no bullshit in there and whatever. But I think that people confuse. I think they kind of conflate suffering and death a lot. Like in a factory farm, it is kind of fucked up what they do to cows and how they like kind of squish them in. And they do the same thing with chickens as well. But I don't think you have to support that system because for like certain grass-fed beef, grass-fed and grass-finished beef brands, like you could buy an alternative that's only like $1 or two more than like corn-fed, and the corn-fed ones are usually the ones that are through factory farms. So for like $1 or two more, you could just buy something that's naturally, well, more naturally occurring, healthier for you, and it's just like more humane. If you're concerned about the humanity and the treatment of animals in that environment. But as far as I'm concerned, as long as something doesn't suffer when it's killed, I think it's fine. I think it's totally fine. Like if you go hunting, they tell you here's where you aim. Like you don't want the thing to suffer, right? Like you want to take it out in one shot. So I think it's kind of the same thing there. As long as the thing doesn't suffer, you're good.
As far as I'm concerned, right? I'm not really too worried about that. You think when a crocodile eats a kid in Florida, or when a lion, tears someone's head off, you think they're concerned about the humanity of it? No. I care about my own species, my fellow humans more than I do, say, a different species. And I'm completely okay with saying that. I don't really care too much about worrying about the humanity of things, and I wouldn't be willing to spend $2, $3, $4 extra on vegan meat. And I think these veganites, as I like to call, I don't know if that's a word, but I just made it up. I think they need to come to a solution that's basically comparable or cheaper than the alternative if they want to get people to convert. They're not going to get people to pay more for these goods. They need to basically have them the same price or be less than its alternative. Otherwise, they're not going to get the conversion that they want.
Yeah, and vegan stuff isn't healthier. Like I said, the vegan stuff is, if you actually look at it as a spectrum, you have all the corn-fed stuff. Like I'm going to use beef for example, right? Like you're going to have steak. All the beef stuff is all the way on the left, the corn-fed. Then you have grass-fed, slightly more than the corn-fed, but like infinitely healthier, right? Which is, like I said, $1 or two more. A lot of people like myself, they don't really mind the $1 or two more because it's like an investment in your health, and it's going to give you more nutrients, which in theory will give you more energy. It'll make you more productive, and it will help your endocrine system and your the whole phospholipid bilayer system, and it's going to keep you out of the hospital, and it's going to prevent you from getting sick. So it's more or less like $1 or two more per meal you have with, or per servings, right? Like you do the math, but it's like a little bit more, and it's more or less like an investment in better quality food, which is good for your health. Then the vegan shit is all the way on the right end of the spectrum, and it's like $10 or $15 more and like a quarter of the portion size, and it tastes like shit. It's not good, and you'll develop a host of different nutrient deficiencies because you're thinking, oh my God, I'm not eating meat. Like, we don't have to eat meat anymore. But then you have an iron immune deficiency, you have B12 deficiency, you have omega-3 deficiency, and you have B6 deficiency, and you look pale, you look ghastly, you look sick, and you look like you've lived in, I don't know, the North Pole for like a year. So it's just funny.
All right. I guess that will do it for today's episode of the Anonymous Investors Podcast. That's it, buddy. Close it off.
Yep. Thanks for coming out. Peace out.
Subscribe. Your mother's a hoe. Your mother's a slut.